Hi everybody and welcome to World War II News. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Natasha.
And tonight our focus is on the change of the defense industry and weapon production. World War II left over 400,000 United States citizens dead, making it the second most deadly war in United States history. What led to this massive amount of casualties was the introduction of automatic weapons. In previous wars, weapons were mechanical. Now with the introduction of rapid rifle fire, new weapons had to be developed and produced.
That's right, Amanda. Rifle guns, tanks, and ammunition all had to be produced in the United States before being sent out to the battlefield. The United States produced 12,500,000 assault rifles, 41 billion rounds of ammunition, and 60,973 tanks, the most of any country in World War II. Weapon production was what stabilized the United States economy after the Great Depression. The government signed cost-plus contracts through which the government agreed to pay companies to make wartime products, as well as to provide these companies with a percentage of the costs as profit, this system getting many companies to convert to war production.
You're right, Natasha. After the government signed off on these cost-plus contracts to get more companies involved in wartime production, because the U.S. military needed as many supplies and weapons as possible, Congress set up the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, or the RFC, which was established during the Depression and could provide loans to companies wanting to convert their factories to war production.
These two programs allowed almost all of the major industries and some 200,000 companies to convert to war production by the summer of 1942. For example, because automobile factories were suited for mass production of military equipment, they produced trucks, jeeps, and tanks, as well as built artillery, rifles, mines, helmets, and pontoon bridges. Specifically, Chrysler built fuselages, General Motors made airplane engines, guns, trucks, and tanks, Packard built Rolls-Royce engines for the British Air Force, and Henry Ford created the assembly line for the enormous B-24 bomber at Willow Run Airport near Detroit.
Another important figure in the production of war materials was Henry Kaiser, who transferred techniques he learned in the construction industry to shipbuilding. His methods were based around quantity over quality. Henry built so many ships because, instead of building an entire ship in one place, parts were prefabricated and brought to a shipyard for assembly. Kaiser's shipyards built mainly Liberty ships, and through the use of Kaiser's techniques, the time it took to construct a ship dropped from 244 days to 41 days. His shipyards actually produced 30% of all American ships built during the war.
American industry, responsible for mobilizing its vast resources for the needs of the Army, are Under Secretary of War Robert Patterson and Lieutenant General Brian B. Somerville, Chief of the Service of Supply. Behind the desks, behind the drawing boards, behind the benches, on the assembly lines, American industry is making the greatest production effort in history to supply our Army with ever-increasing quantities of the weapons of war. Soldier for soldier, our fighting men can match anything the Axis sends against them. And worker for worker, American industry is determined to meet the Axis challenge in the production plants. Management and labor alike stand solidly behind us. They know their stake in this conflict. They know the grim fate of free enterprise and free labor in the path of Axis conquest.
Continuing on, President Roosevelt tried to improve the mobilization and production process of war supplies by creating the War Production Board, or the WPB, which had the authority to control the distribution of raw materials and supplies. However, the WPB clashed with the military because military agencies continued signing contracts without the consult of the WPB. So in 1943, Roosevelt established the Office of War Mobilization, or the OWM, to settle arguments between agencies.
As the previously mentioned agencies allowed for the United States to produce more war materials, more people were needed in the factories to build these supplies. 8 million women stepped in and answered the call and entered into the workforce, with ethnic groups, such as African Americans and Latinos, finding job opportunities as never before. Between 1940 and 1945, the female percentage of the U.S. workforce increased from 27% to nearly 37%, and by 1945, nearly 1 out of every 4 married women worked outside the home.
As women entered the workforce and built supplies for the Army, they wanted to be represented and given greater rights in society. So in May 1942, Congress established the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, or the WAAC. However, women were still unhappy that this was only an auxiliary corps and not part of the actual army. And so in 1943, Congress replaced the WAAC with the Women's Army Corps, or the WAC. These programs allowed for women to get more involved in the war effort and help the Army both directly by being trained and entering into the Army, as well as indirectly by working tirelessly to create wartime materials and weapons.
Thanks, Natasha. After hearing about the important role U.S. women played in World War II, especially in producing all of the supplies and weapons for the U.S. Army, we wanted to share with all of you a personal account of one of these women. We'll be right back after these messages with Rosie the Riveter.
Are you a woman who's sick and tired of only doing housework? Do you want to help our country succeed in the war? Then you should get a job and work. You could work in a factory and build ships and airplanes. Or you could be a train conductor or even a nurse. Help build the weapons that will help the United States win the war. The possibilities are endless for a working woman, at least temporarily. So come find yourself a job today. Welcome back to World War II News. As you just saw in that commercial, with all of the men sent out to the battlefield, women temporarily took men's jobs and worked in factories, hospitals, and more. We have all the hard-working women to thank for most of our country's military equipment. Our field reporter Diego recently caught up with one of the most famous working women from World War II, Rosie the Riveter. Now here he is to give you an account of what he talked about.
Rosie the Riveter is one of 300,000 workers in the industry. They have a variety of different jobs, from assembling parts of the horizontal stapler to making parts of tanks. Society is changing, with men running off to war and women calling to fill their jobs, thought to be only for men. As industrialization increased, ordinary women like Rosie left their domestic life and job to accomplish tasks that society thought was only for men's only task. She said, I quote, I, along with my other female co-workers, help build different types of planes, tanks, and other weapons to win the war. We are creating a new image of the role of women in American society, an image of a hard-working, independent, equal individual of the United States. Since men went to Europe, women became the backbone of the economy.
Thanks, Diego. That's all we have for you guys tonight. I'm Natasha.
And I'm Amanda.
And we'll leave you with some pictures and videos of weapon production during the war. Thanks for watching.
Steel has been rightly called the sinews of peace and the backbone of war. Behind the guns and tanks and ships and planes are the blast furnaces and open hearts, the electric furnaces and blooming mills. Tending these giant furnaces have always stood a breed of men apart, giants in the land, those men of steel. But with our country in peril, the women of America rallied to the support of their men. And here in this almost the last great industry we thought could be handled only by men, these mothers, wives, and sweethearts came to stand shoulder to shoulder with them in almost every capacity. But as the need grew for more and more production of the basic metal itself, more loyal women with a dash of true American pluck and venturesomeness edged further and further into the real work of steelmaking. Emmylou Spillane, a college girl, now makes pin tests of the steel as it comes from the furnaces. Tab girls were needed at the soaking pit, so Judy McGalla replaced a man at the scale board.